Before we get to today's episode, we want to introduce you to our newest partner, which, like us, is pure South Florida. That's Doral Toyota, where you can find all of your favorite Toyota models, whether you're looking for a new, used, or certified pre-owned vehicle. Doral Toyota is located at 9775 Northwest 12th Street. That's 9775 Northwest 12th Street, just a few blocks from International and Dolphin Malls. Experience the Doral difference, which means 4 years of complimentary maintenance and roadside assistance on all new vehicles. Also, in-house financing is available for credit-related issues. If you mention 5 reasons when you call 305-680-1129, that's 305-680-1129, or stop into the dealership, you work with a dedicated manager, not a salesman. Unlike other dealers, Doral Toyota prides itself on an honest and transparent buying process. That's Doral Toyota, DoralToyota.com, or stop in at 9775 Northwest 12th Street. Vamos, let's go.
Football season is upon us, and that means that it's time to start previewing the Miami Dolphins heading into the 2018 season. And we're going to do so, Ethan, in a 3-part series by talking to each of the beat writers from the various newspapers in South Florida. We'll talk to the Herald guys, we'll talk to the Post guys, but right now we're talking to the Sun Sentinel Miami Dolphins reporters, Omar Kelly and Chris Perkins, kind enough to join us here on the 5 Reasons podcast. Omar, Perk, thanks for doing it.
Hey, thanks for having us, man. Looking forward to this.
We wanted to kind of start by, obviously we're having all the newspapers on the podcast, so we kind of wanted to get into the dynamics between all of you. So, Omar, we'll start with you. What's it like working with Perkins and working this beat?
Perkins, as everybody who knows Chris Perkins, he's very laid back, very cool, and nothing really bothers Perk. We have a competition where the goal of the competition is to have Perkins say, you, whoever it is. And to get him irritated enough to the point where he curses somebody out. And, we keep tally.
Perk, how often does that happen?
Well, how I have it is usually the target of it because, me, I'll just go off on some nonsensical rant and then somebody brings logic into it and I get frustrated. And so I just drop a, Hal or whatever. So, yeah, that's pretty much usually the way it goes.
Now, you never did that to us because just for listeners who aren't aware, Chris Perkins was in with Chris Winningham and I for about a full year, actually, on 790 the ticket, and we never drove you to the you juice you Chris point. So obviously we did something wrong.
Yeah, you know what? It's different crowds, man. Different people know how to push my button, so that's the button that gets pushed at the Dolphins most often.
Here's my biggest gripe with Perk. When we go on the road, you know how everybody on the road and do things. I'm a night guy. But Perk gets in there at noon, and he's got to watch his college football, and he's been drinking since noon. And by the time it's evening, and I'm like ready to go out, Perk is drunk and ready to go to bed. Yeah.
Hey, I'm a good Texan. The day starts at noon, Saturday of the road game. And even Saturday, you got to watch college football. And, I'm a Texan. That involves a couple of beers. And, yeah, after you watch 4 games, that's just the way it goes. What am I going to say?
The night is just getting started for me, baby.
Perk is down for the count by the time the Stanford game starts.
Yeah, I don't see a whole lot of West Coast college football on the road.
Well, so what for you guys is the best city to travel to? Perk, we'll start with you.
Oh man, well, you know what, New York, but you gotta kind of take New York out of the equation, don't you? Like that's pretty much going to be everybody's favorite city. I love the Bay Area, man. The Bay Area and DC are very close, but yeah, San Francisco, Oakland, it's got everything. If you like food, if you like wine, if you like sports, if you like academia, if you like music, it's got something for everybody, man. I love the Bay Area.
Omar, best NFL city you like covering away games at?
I'm gonna have to have New Orleans high on my list. California, they've been really ramming California down my throat. I just can't get it. I can't feel the vibe. And honestly, I'm going to miss San Diego. So I would have to rank San Diego number 1 because you get everything. You get flavor, you get debauchery, you get great food, you get the water, you get cool weather. So San Diego, unfortunately, is rest in peace.
R.I.P. San Diego. Ethan, what was it for you?
Well, I got to say this. I actually had a good time one night with Omar out in Buffalo, which I don't think that
oh,
is
yeah.
possible.
You were part of the one great Buffalo trip that I've had.
That's the one. I think you, me, and Donovan Campbell, from what I recall, actually.
There was one great Buffalo trip, which is why I'm always lobbying for the Dolphins to get it in September when the college kids come back and, the streets are people are partying. And I'm like, man, that was the one great Buffalo memory I have, and unfortunately, we have not been able to replicate that.
No, because you keep going back in September or in November and December. I mean, for me, city-wise, I'm with Perk. I love the Bay Area, but for me, actually, for NBA, it's Toronto. I love it, and Perk and I think, have had a good time there. Actually, there's some stories from New Orleans with Perk that I'm not going to tell on this particular podcast. That involved the lobby of the Marriott, which we'll just leave that one right there. Actually,
hold on, what sport are y'all covering? NBA or NFL? Because I might be able to guess what happened.
It was NBA with Perk. It was NBA. Yeah. It was NFL with you, but it was NBA.
Hold on. Was it the team hotel or just a regular media hotel?
No, this was the regular media hotel, and it's just stuff that lives in infamy with Perk. See,
I can't wait until like 20 years from now when we do like the Perk is just retired from the Sun Sentinel, and now the statute of limitations has expired on all these stories that relates to employment, and we can really let loose with Perk. I'm so excited for that.
One of my favorite lines from Perk on an evening out where he wasn't too, he wasn't over the line,
inebriated,
and he had some energy. Yeah, he was. I forget where we were. We were at a club. I think it might have been Cleveland, and I had my eye. This is in my single days. I had my eyes on a young lady, and Perkins says to me, "Well, she's nice, but show me her mama." And
y'all know I love older women now.
Oh man, now you reminded me of Perk. Now you reminded me of Dallas.
That's my favorite Perk line.
Perk. Now you reminded me of Dallas, and I'm not that NBA Finals 2006, and I'm just going to leave that one alone too. So we'll.
Hey, and I'll tell y'all. I'll get back to why me and Omar worked so well together. And this was clearly defined. It was the day that we walk out of a meeting in the auditorium with Gase or whoever it is. And so there's this guy standing across the street from the Dolphins holding a cardboard sign begging for employment. I ran toward him. Omar ran away from him. That's why we worked so well together. I love the nonsense. And it was a nonsensical story. This guy actually played at Michigan State. He was a DB. But Omar wanted nothing to do with that. And that's just the type of story that I love. So, yeah, it turned out to be a pretty funny story. But, yeah, that's why we work so well together.
Perk, you actually brought that guy on our radio show. You don't remember? And then I got confused about what position he played at Michigan State. I kept calling him a receiver. I think. What was he? He was a DB, right?
He was a DB.
I kept calling him a receiver.
It didn't matter because he really didn't play, so it's all good.
Fantastic. This is brilliant. Let's get to the football now. And so what we're going to do for each of our previews is kind of tackle three big questions. We're going to kind of divvy all the big position groups and storylines, so we're not talking about all the same stuff. So where we want to begin, guys, is with Adam Gase. And I feel like he's a really interesting kind of conversation point because the Dolphins have had a lot of turnover at head coach. They've had a lot of turnover just about everywhere, but at head coach in particular. And I kind of wonder where he is at because obviously when you make the playoffs with this franchise, you're theoretically supposed to be golden, but last year was such a disaster that I'm kind of curious where he's at now. So I'll start with you, Perk. Where do you feel like his sort of position within the franchise, within the league, and sort of in a more broad sense is with Adam Gase?
Pivotal year for Adam Gase because he's got to show that he can win. But this is a guy who was 10-6 his first year, 6-10 last year. So now he's basically a 500 coach. And so he's almost starting from ground zero from that standpoint. I'm not sure what we've seen from Adam Gase that really is reassuring in the last 2 years. The one thing I think that he's got to be able to do is let his talent decide what kind of system he's going to run. And I know Adam Gase is frustrated. He hasn't run his offense. Jay Ajayi emerges in 2016. And you guys know Gase wants a passing offense. They become a running team in 2016. Last year, Ryan Tannehill gets injured, so he hasn't run his offense yet. For whatever reason, if Kenyan Drake is outstanding this year, you've got to go to a running offense. So I want to see if his ego can be held in check and he can allow the talent to take over and not force his system. That, I think, is going to be the number one thing toward winning. Do not force a passing game. And to me, the second thing with Adam Gase and his standing is his personnel decisions. When you look at, he wanted Jay Cutler and he wanted Julius Thomas, and he was the guy, who had Chris Furster on his staff and Lawrence Timmons and Ray Malaluga. His judgment has to be called into question because of last year. The first year, you cut the 4 offensive linemen, you go to the playoffs, you're thinking Adam Gase knows what he's doing. Again, now we're at ground zero. So to me, Adam Gase has got to win, but he's got to show that his ego won't get in the way with the offense, and he's got to show that his personnel decisions are solid.
From my standpoint, if you look at what Adam Gase accomplished in his first year, if I tell you I'm going to take a rookie head coach whose team is going to endure a ton of injuries, losing 2 of their top 5 players in Mike Pouncey and Rashad Jones for most of the season, amongst others, without his starting quarterback who doesn't play the final month of the season and still get to the playoffs, I would say, man, sign me up for that. I mean, if I tell Dolphins fans, hey, you're going to lose 2 of your top 5 players, you're going to lose your starting quarterback for a month, and your team is still going to make the playoffs, would you sign up for that right now in 2018? I guarantee you everybody would. Now, the question is, can he do that consistently? I don't know the answer to that question, but to me, it ends and starts with his offense. This is his 3rd year in the system. He's finally got his quarterback back. He's got the running back who can do everything that he wants in the backfield, and 2 of them in Kenyan Drake and Frank Gore. Now, if you can't produce an offense that's out of the bottom 10, and let's set the bar high and say a top 16 offense in the NFL, in your 3rd year, when you're supposed to be this quarterback whisperer, when you're supposed to be an offensive guru, something is wrong. When you've fortified your offensive line, when you've drafted 2 tight ends, something is wrong. And I'm not saying that I love the talent that's on this team. I'm just saying, same thing that Brian Billick once preached. What gets you hired will get you fired. And Adam Gase was hired to produce a better offense and a better quarterback, and we need to see it.
To me, it is about the offense for him. And what it's about for me is that what he did this offseason was he allowed himself to put his system on the field, to go multiple. And now he's got a team. We can talk about Landry, and I know we'll get into that a little bit. But he has a team that can game plan for a particular opponent because he has enough different types of weapons to do it. And he has a team that I think can adjust in-game, which is something that I think he needs to get better at. So to me, that's why this is a tell year for him, because I didn't feel like they had the personnel. And I go all the way back to early Belichick in New England. And even that first team in New England, before we knew what Brady would become when Bledsoe was still the quarterback, the thing about that team was Belichick had a lot of sort of moving parts. He didn't have anything great, but he had a lot of different ways that he could scheme for a particular opponent. And it was the same on defense also. And I don't feel like the Dolphins have had the depth over the past couple of years, particularly when they got hit with some injuries, to do that. So to me, I'm with Perk on this. He's starting clean with me. I liked a lot of what happened the first year in terms of sort of cutting the 3 offensive linemen, telling Jay Ajayi not to come with him on the trip. I mean, a lot of the things that I thought he did the first year, he was trying to establish a program. I thought last year the decision to bring in Cutler clearly was a bad one, an organizational decision, but I know he had a big hand in that. So I'm not going to let him off the hook for that. But Jay Cutler was not a starting quarterback in this league at this point. And so it's really hard for me to evaluate what happened last season when you look at 2 or 3 games last year that if you just had competent quarterback play, I'm not talking about top 10 quarterback play. I'm just talking about somewhere between 11 and 20, which is where I think Ryan Tannehill is. I think they win 3 more games last season. And so I think we're looking at an 8 or 9 win team instead of a 6 win team. So to me, the ability to go multiple guys, which he has not been able to do, is why I think there's a chance this year for us to finally see the Gase offense.
For me, the other element of this, too, is that I feel, and Perk mentioned this, the personnel element of this, where he's taken over the roster in some respects and gotten rid of the guys that he feel like didn't fit his way of playing. And so now as we kind of look ahead to this season, this feels like he sort of feels like this is his team, and thus he has to kind of produce with this team because a lot of people view it as among the worst rosters in the league, and yet he's kind of responsible in large part for why it looks that way. So, Omar, when you look at the way that the personnel decisions have changed in this offseason, how much of that do you think Adam Gase is behind?
Oh, I think he's behind a lot of it, not all of it. I know he was against a couple of the moves, and I know he wanted and worked hard to get Landry back. But business-wise, It didn't make sense for the organization. The Mike Pouncey move, I know he wasn't a fan of that one, but he stood by the organization and supported it because it's going to move them forward. Now, the question to me is, was he on board or not on board with getting rid of Ndamukong Suh? Because that's a huge defensive piece. And I know Ndamukong is a lot of things. He's definitely not a leader. He tried, but he's definitely not a leader. He's a mercenary. But you just don't banish good players, and I think they did a lot of that. He could put this whole, this is more my team, more my culture, more my type of guys, more leaders. All you've done is added aged veterans to your team after you've gotten rid of stars, and now you're telling the fan base, we're not more talented, but we're going to be better. And Dolphins fans, with their history of mediocrity, are just supposed to accept that. Like, yeah, okay, all right, we believe you. And I just think it's hard to sell.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. It occurs to me that this team, this roster, the construction, it does have Adam Gase's fingerprints all over it. I agree with Omar. You can't say that this is totally Gase's team and this is everything that he wants, because I agree on the Ndamukong Suh thing. However, I will say this, that this is the best Adam Gase roster that we've seen in 3 years, meaning it is diverse and it is multiple. But again, let's see with his ego that if Kenyan Drake takes over, or if you start winning in a way that you didn't expect, are you going to let the winning continue, or are you going to try to force your offense down this team's throat? This isn't a Super Bowl winning team. Nobody thinks that. The goal of this team is to get into the playoffs. So to me, you get there any way that you have to offensively. And I really wonder if Adam Gase can keep his offensive ego in check. And if his offense led by Ryan Tannehill's right arm works, so be it. But if this offense is led by Kenyan Drake's legs, is he going to let that continue?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Perk, this is the thing about it. I'm with you that 2 years ago he went with Ajayi because it was working. I'm not really that concerned that he would go against something that's working. Like, I know we talk a lot about his ego, and I want to delve into that with you guys a little bit more here, because you cover him every day. You kind of know what he's about, not just in front of the camera, but when he's not in front of the camera. I mean, all the coaches that I've covered over the years, they really are in a lot of ways two different people. They're the ones that the public see, and there's the ones that deal with you privately. Jimmy was kind of the same either way, but Nick Saban was kind of a both ways. It just depends on the guy. but I just wanted to get into the personality of him, because I think that plays into the strategy with him. So, Perk, you have a concern that his ego is going to get in the way. Where does that ego come from? Because, I mean, he's been a head coach for 2 years. As you said, he's a 500 coach at this point. He was given the stamp of approval by Papa John's salesman, Peyton Manning. But other than that, like, where does the ego come from? And I'm wondering, Omar, because you've covered a bunch of coaches there, from Philbin to Sperano, et cetera, how strong is that ego, and does it get in the way of him doing things?
Well, I'll tell you this. You go back to what Omar said, quoting Brian Billick, the same thing that got you hired will get you fired. If this guy does not get his offensive system in there, he is a passing guru, a quarterback whisperer, like Omar said. If he goes 3 years and we don't see that offense, is he comfortable winning with a running game in 2 of those years? Say they have another 10-6 season this year. Is he comfortable with that as his identity, as his offensive identity? That's a big battle to me. That is what Adam Gase does. So
it's not a battle. He'll tell you, I'm not comfortable running the ball. That's something that he has not even been shy about telling. We've known it privately. He'll tell you publicly. He said at the owners' meeting, like, that's not what I want to do. That's not my offense. And yeah, he's got to build an offense around whatever makes him comfortable. Hell, he wasn't comfortable with Jay Ajayi, which is why he got traded. He's not comfortable running the ball. And both me and Perk believe that is their best team. I can't sit here and say your best chances to win is to put the ball in Ryan Tannehill's hands and predicate your success on his decisions. Now, Adam Gase is trying to prove to the world, including South Florida, including Dolphins fans, and most importantly, the media, that he knows what the hell he's doing and that he's right. And that's where it comes from. That internal arrogance, which I love, by the way. I get it. I understand it. It matches him, and it matches his team. Think about how he coaches his team. It's an aggressive team, and I love that personality. He's going to go down swinging. Like, I've talked to him. He's like, I'll never give up play calling. I'm doing this job so that I can call the plays. So he's never going to change who he is, and I don't encourage him to change who he is. So is he going to buy into a running game leads to his team's success? I think he will, because he bought into it during the J.J. year in 2016. The question is, will he ever stop trying to create this passing offense that he knows he can do? I don't think he will.
Is the reason why he's stubborn about it his background? Why would you say is the reason why he doesn't want that to change about him?
Internal confidence, bordering on arrogance. In his mind, he knows he can do it. I remember one time I was talking to him on the sidelines, and we were just talking, and he was just like, look it up. Every guy that I've been with offensively, they had their best year with me. Every guy. And I did look it up. And there are only two exceptions to that. Matt Forte and Martellus Bennett. Some way or another, you could put it at yards, you could put it touchdowns, you could put it receptions. They had their biggest years with him. And that drives him. And he, without a question, wants that to be the case for Kenyan Drake, wants that to be the case for Devontae Parker, wants that to be the case for Kenny Stills, and it will continue to drive him.
Omar, to that point, though, and again, how many coaches have you covered with the Dolphins at this point? Your first year was what?
Cam Cameron.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great start.
I blame you, Ethan, for Cam Cameron's foolishness, the fail forward pass. Mm-hmm. You thought it was so genius and wrote a big old column.
I did.
The book that it came from, and you made him think he was smart.
I did, Omar, but I will say this. By the way, Omar and I joined Twitter on exactly the same day. So if you want to blame anybody for Omar's Twitter account, blame me. We did it within minutes of each other at the Sun Sentinel offices. But Omar...
And just like everything else, I fought them on that too.
Oh,
my God. Why don't we have to do this?
Oh, my God. You were like, what is this for? Yeah, people don't realize that. As active as Omar is right now, I remember that day at the Sun Sentinel office, what used to be that's like 2 Sun Sentinel offices ago, by the way.
Yeah.
That was the nice one on Las Olas. But I remember that day distinctly because you were like not having it. Like this guy had come in, they brought in this social media expert to show us like the power of Twitter.
Twitter will run the world. These soccer moms will run the world. And I'm looking at them like, what the hell are y'all talking about?
Yeah, you were looking at me like, we're not doing this. And like we set up the accounts the exact same day. So again, I'm partially responsible for that. But I also
keep in mind, they forced us to set up those accounts.
Oh, I know.
And they literally took our phones and put them on our phones.
That's exactly right. But I will tell you, that year, I actually did write a column about how Cam Cameron should give up the play calling responsibilities because it was too much for him. And he actually called me at the Sentinel office to discuss it because I got all these other offensive coordinators who he respected saying, yeah, it's not a good idea. Like, just break it up. You need to run the team first. And he called me, and he wasn't really fighting it because the people I spoke to were people he respected. He's like, well, we'll see at the end of the season. Well, they were 1-15. Anyway, so let's go back to this. So your first coach was Cam Cameron, then Sperano, then Philbin, Dan Campbell, right? And then we've got
don't forget Todd Bowles.
Oh, Todd Bowles, 5 games, right? Something like that. Okay, yeah. So all right. So in terms of confidence, in terms of arrogance, you said confidence bordering on arrogance. Yes. Where is Gase? Is he first?
Is exactly how I would describe Adam Gase.
And is he first on that list?
No, Jimmy Johnson would be first. Because remember, I did an internship covering Jimmy Johnson, whose personality is as close to Adam Gase. If you saw the unfiltered Adam Gase, you'd see Jimmy Johnson from the fan base's perspective. I love his confidence. You know, he needs to play mind games a little bit better like Jimmy did. And I think that would sort of push him into that realm. And obviously he needs the success that, Jimmy had, which, 10-6 for 5 years would get Adam Gase one of the 5 highest paid contracts in the NFL. So right. I don't think Dolphin fans should probably poo-poo what Jimmy Johnson did. But he would be right under there, right under Jimmy Johnson, but definitely ahead of Tony Sperano. Intelligence, ahead of all of them except for Jimmy Johnson. Cam Cameron thought he was smart, but I'd probably list him as the dumbest of them all. Leadership, I would put him behind Jimmy Johnson and Tony Sperano. Tony Sperano had a way, it was us against them.
Right.
And it didn't matter who the them was. The them could be the media. Tony Sperano had a way of making that team. Remember when they were fighting back and they were winning? And then they lost to Philadelphia while they lost Jake Long, and they lost their left tackle, and they like had a center playing tackle, and they couldn't protect the quarterback. And the management looked at that like, that one loss, we got to get them out of here and put into our bowl. Because I do believe that team would have won the rest of their games and produced a respectable season, and then it would have been hard to fire Tony Soprano. So they jumped on the opportunity. But it was Tony's leadership, which is basically he turned that team into us against the Dolphins fan base, us against the Dolphins ownership, us against us against everybody. And they really rallied around that thing. So leadership, I'd have to put him behind Tony Soprano.
This is the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Sports by Miami for Miami on demand. We now have 10 podcasts in the network posting roughly 15 times per week. All can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and several cross-platform apps. We are on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Here's some of what you missed last week on the Fish Tank when they interviewed Mike Pouncey.
You know, every single day when I came to work, I was the best football player I could be, and I felt like I made guys better around me, and I love the organization. I mean, we didn't win as much as we should have, but I love being a Miami Dolphin. I love the fact of saying, hey, listen, I'm a Dolphin.
If you want to get involved as a sponsor or a contributor, reach out to us at number 5 Reason Sports on Twitter. And don't forget to punch 5 Reasons in your search bar and then hit subscribe.
I want to move on now to the next portion of our conversation here today. And one of the things that we talked about was all the different personnel moves that the Dolphins made. Now, the biggest on offense was Jarvis Landry, but I want to get to the biggest one on defense, and that's Ndamukong Suh leaving the Miami Dolphins. He eventually joins the Los Angeles Rams. And for you, Omar, how big of a loss is it to this defense?
I think it's a huge loss because he's a difficult player to replace. I would say maybe 5 defensive tackles in the NFL can do what Ndamukong Suh did. People expecting Akeem Spence, who's a career journeyman, or you already got Jordan Phillips, but to those expecting Akeem Spence or Jordan Phillips or Vincent Taylor to step up and do what Ndamukong Suh did, playing next to Davin Godchild, that's kind of unrealistic. So a lot more is being put on the shoulders of that player or those players, and I'm not sure they're going to be ready to handle that load. So, and here's the problem. Here's the biggest problem about that shortcoming of this defense. Bad defensive tackle play puts pressure on who, gentlemen?
Linebackers and safeties.
Okay, and which area on the team would you gentlemen say is the biggest mystery, concern, lack of depth, problematic area?
Definitely linebacker.
And put pressure on your biggest concern. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I think that the big thing here is going to be if Matt Burke can design a system around his talent. Because, I clearly do that run defense. But, can you devise a system that takes advantage of your linebackers? Well, your defensive tackles at first. And quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure what those defensive tackles do well among Jordan Phillips and Vincent Taylor and Davon Godchild and Akeem Spence. And that's not a knock on them. It's just, are you a good run stopper or are you a good pass rusher? Can you take a double team? We saw Godchild do that a little bit, but whatever those guys do, can Matt Burke design a system that accentuates their talent, that plays to their strengths? And can these linebackers, I agree with Omar, let's face it, can they overachieve? Because you're going to be starting basically 2 inexperienced linebackers alongside Kiko Alonso when you consider Raekwon McMillan, who's basically a rookie because he got injured last year, his rookie year, and then whoever else starts. I mean, I guess if you have Stephon Anthony, he's fairly experienced, but, if you have Chase Allen or Jerome Baker in there, the 3rd-round pick from Ohio State, whoever, you're going to be playing basically 2 guys at linebacker who aren't used to being starters. So, if Matt Burke can devise a system that plays to their strengths, maybe you can cover for Ndamukong Suh. But if you try to run the same defense that you ran last year with Suh in there, I think you're going to have major problems this year.
Let me ask you this, guys, because, like you said, they haven't really replaced Suh with a veteran defensive tackle, which or a really quality one, which is what I was kind of expecting they might try to do, because they did patch in a number of different areas. Like you look at receiver, and Chris has talked about this a lot on the pod. They kind of went 2 for 1, right? Like they bring in Amendola and Albert Wilson, for the price of Landry, and they did that in some other areas too. They didn't really do it there. They did bring Robert Quinn in on the outside, which may allow William Hayes to play more inside. So is that, you think, a direction that they would go where we see Hayes? Because I know Hayes got a lot of snaps inside already, and I thought he did a really nice job for them before he got hurt last year. Is that where you think they'll head with this? Because they don't have one guy on the roster. I don't care how good a couple of the kids look like they may become. They're not going to be Ndamukong Suh this season.
I definitely think they're going to be putting William Hayes inside, and rotating those other defensive tackles. But William Hayes is going to be probably the third down guy, if not work a couple first downs as an end.
Yeah, how William Hayes performs on those third down situations, I would imagine that he's mostly going to be inside on passing situations, but who knows? He might be there a lot on first downs. But hopefully this defense does not regress to the days where they couldn't stop the run. And that's what I'm seeing potentially happening here with Ndamukong Suh being out. And clearly, if that happens, now you're looking at shorter time of possession. You're looking at a more tired defense. You're looking at, what are you going to do with TJ McDonald and Minkah Fitzpatrick and Rashad Jones? Do you have to play them up at the line of scrimmage all the time? Do you have to play that 8-man front? So again, it's up to Matt Burke to look at his talent and figure out, okay, we don't have Suh. How do we play to each player's strength? And look, we know Adam Gase doesn't do much with the defense. This is pretty much all on Matt Burke when you talk about replacing Ndamukong Suh.
One of the players that I wanted to talk about as it relates to replacing Ndamukong Suh is, and Omar, you kind of mentioned it, Akeem Spence is going to play with Devon Godchaux, as if he is sort of the established, clear number one starter, which he is, but he was still a fifth-round pick last year, and the fact that in his second season he's already being relied upon to this level, what did you make of his rookie year, Omar?
I think he had a decent rookie year. He still didn't produce any sacks. Let's not pretend like they were one of the top teams in terms of run-stopping performance. I judge and value players based on how many impact plays have you made during the season that contributed to wins. And I probably put, if you're in the 5 realm, you're a very good player. Hell, Kiko Alonso contributed 5 plays, forced fumbles, a sack. You have to contribute 5 plays that help you produce wins. And Devon Godchaux, he might have had 1. And to me, that's okay. But hell, Jordan Phillips had like 3. So I'm not going to sit here and praise him and say, oh, he's the answer to Miami's prayers. Hell, he was playing next to Ndamukong Suh. How come you didn't win more? You getting tackles is cool, but let's not pretend like you were, one of the top run-stuffing teams in the NFL. So it's okay. It's probably kind of about like the whole draft class average.
Omar, how important, and I'll throw this at Perk too, how important is that position generally? To me, the issue with the Suh signing initially was that you were investing so much money in a position that didn't have the impact that it had in years past. Because teams are more spread these days. There's less going on in the middle to start with. And also, it's more difficult to get pressure up the middle than it used to be. And to that point, because of all the short drops, I mean, you've got quarterbacks taking 3-yard drops and getting the ball out right away. It's not, Dan Marino's 7-step drop, right, and gun it down. Even with a release like Marino's, where there's never been one like that in history, at least he was holding the ball a little bit longer. These guys, it's just out. Like, it's just part of the scheme. So was this essentially an admission by the front office this offseason that it wasn't necessarily Suh a player who I think we all agree was a very good player for the Dolphins, or Suh a leader, which we all agree is not really in his makeup, as much as Omar you say he tried, it wasn't in his makeup, but really about where the league has gone these days, that, okay, we can kind of get by with okay players at that position as long as we have playmakers on the edge, basically, and playmakers in the defensive backfield. Because it strikes me that is a total, and I'm fine with them changing strategy, by the way. I'm okay with it. Like, don't keep doing the same stupid thing all the time. But it does seem like it's a complete 180 for them in terms of the way that Tannenbaum went about this.
I remember back when they allowed, I believe it was like the final 6 game. Perk always knows the number. How many rushing yards did they allow in like the final 6 game, Perk? You could always throw that number at me. 900. Yeah, like 998. It was just short of 1,000 yards they allowed rushing the year before they got Suh. I believe it was the 2014 season. And, Suh was supposed to be the answer. Suh was supposed to fix it all. And then they got rid of Jared Odrick. They got rid of, I think, Randy Starks. So, they brought in, who's that guy from Houston?
Earl Mitchell?
Yeah, God, I'm looking at his face. Earl Mitchell.
Yeah, Earl Mitchell, yeah. You had great respect for Earl Mitchell.
Yeah.
Y'all had a great relationship. They must have went fishing or something. But in that defense, remember that year how bad it was? Then the defense got worse with Ndamukong Suh stopping the run. And we're like, wasn't he supposed to fix it? And, and every year but last year, they were dismal against the run. So, and last year they got better and they're like, this ain't working. If this is the best that we could do, this ain't working. So they scrapped it and they got more defensive ends. And this team can rush a wave of 3 starting defensive ends. I guess they're trying to follow the Philadelphia Eagles blueprint and just have them in there. What do they call that? They call it the relay unit, where they just keep handing the baton to the next guy. Keep rushing and keep rushing and keep rushing. Okay, that's cute. That's good. That's great. But if you can't stop the run, your opponent is going to be in 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 5 all damn game long. Then somebody got to get lucky. That's not a great way to build your defense, in my opinion. I'm a trench guy. Yes, your quarterback is important. Yes, your quarterback is the end all. Yes, your quarterback is the guy who's going to take your team wherever it's going to go. But if you don't have a respectable running game, if you can't protect the quarterback, if you can't stop the run, if you can't rush the quarterback, you don't have a chance in the NFL. And all of that I spoke of gets done at the line of scrimmage. So if you build and fortify your offensive line, your quarterback will have a chance. If you build and you fortify your defense and you can stop the run like those Casey Rogers Dolphins defense did, your team will be in great 3rd down positions and situations. And then maybe the pressure will force a turnover or force a negative play. That's how you build a team. Unfortunately, this age and generation and fantasy football and Madden players, they just want points, offense, throw. And the head coach of the Miami Dolphins is of this generation. But I don't believe that's how you build a winning team. And everything comes back. And you saw the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, they passed the ball a hell of a lot. They also run the ball effectively. They stopped the run, and they hounded the quarterback. They probably were the best defensive line in the NFL and one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. That wasn't a coincidence.
Yeah, I think that the Ndamukong Suh thing, Ethan raises an interesting point about the value of that position in today's NFL, and the Dolphins have made a philosophical change, but I don't actually know the answer to that question. I guess we're going to find out the value of the defensive tackle in the Dolphins defense. I don't know NFL-wide. If I'm not mistaken, the Dolphins were 14th against the run last year, but what did it do for them? That's why I'm not sure of the value of the defensive tackle. There is value in stopping the run, however. We know that. But in Ndamukong Suh and just how much he's going to be missed, I really don't know. I really don't. So we're going to find out. I do think that, one thing that's interesting about this defense, and Omar, you know this, and I was shocked when I heard Adam Gase say this, that he says that his defense is designed to attack, meaning you get a lead, and then you unleash that pass rush. Well, the problem is they never got a lead, or they rarely got a lead, and it didn't work that way. But you would think that the defense could also work like this. That's kind of the macro. In the micro, you could say, okay, you stop them on 1st and 2nd down, and now you unleash them on 3rd down, and you let the pass rush work that way. And I don't know, you were 14th last year against the run, and I didn't see the 3rd down ferocity and that pass rush, like putting fear into people. So I kind of wonder, does this whole defensive philosophy work? We'll see again if the defensive tackle is going to be, where Ndamukong Suh specifically is going to be missed and how much. But, the whole defensive philosophy of unleashing this pass rush on teams, I just haven't seen it in the first 2 years. So I wonder on the grand scheme of things about this defense, and then specifically the absence of Ndamukong Suh. I have no idea, but I think the defense is going to be worse and not better.
In the latest 3 yards per carry, July 18th, the rookies report. July 25th, the vets report.
Well, thank God that this is coming up soon, because it was getting weird around here during the taint of the off season. We're in between the last mini camp and the training camp. I mean, that is the worst time.
Yeah, like what was best is and we love our listeners, but one listener after our last podcast just sent us, I guess you would call it a review, and it all said, "What TF was that?" Listen to us every Thursday morning as football has returned to the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
So as we move out to the next thing that we wanted to get to, you mentioned stopping the run and how important the defensive line is going to be in that effort. I want to get to running the ball. Now, we talked about in the Adam Gase section as well how he's not necessarily someone who's been built on running the ball, but look at the 2 best victories of the year. Now, one of them was the comeback victory against Atlanta, but the other 2 were, for me, destroying Denver. They didn't have another blowout win for the entirety of the season, and beating New England at home on Monday Night Football. And if you look at those 2 games, Kenyan Drake, after he took over the job, he got 26 touches and over 100 yards rushing in the win over Denver, and he had 30 touches and close to 200 all-purpose yards in the game against New England. And so, Perk, do you feel like Kenyan Drake can be relied upon to be the number 1 every down running back for the Dolphins?
He's still got to prove that to me. He has showed flashes that he can do it, but he still, you guys know my philosophy on the Dolphins. I think they need to win with defense and a run game. I like Ryan Tannehill. I think he's an above average quarterback, but he's not going to lead you to a Super Bowl victory. He will be an integral part of it. And I did say Super Bowl victory, but that's if you build with run and pass, like we saw with Seattle, like we saw last year with Philadelphia, like we saw with other teams, the Giants and the Baltimore Ravens. I think that's what the Dolphins have to do. So when you look at the running game, it to me is the biggest thing that can help your passing game, that can help Ryan Tannehill. That was the biggest thing that helped him in 2016 to me was Jay Ajayi. So can Kenyan Drake do it? We're going to see. I think that he can be effective, but can he be like a Pro Bowl level running back? He's still got to show me that he can do everything associated with the job effectively, staying durable, running the ball, catching, pass receiving, keeping his body healthy, all of that stuff that goes into being a professional, the stuff that has kind of eluded Devontae Parker. Let's see if Kenyan Drake can do that for a whole season. I think that he can, but I'm not sure.
I think he has the potential, the talent. When the Jay Ajayi trade happened, immediately I knew that this was Kenyan Drake's team. Not his backfield, not the running game. This is Kenyan Drake's team. I think he's right now the most talented player on their roster, and offensively. Let me be more specific. And I think he has the talent to hold up. The whole time Jay Ajayi was doing his stuff and looking dominant and looking impressive, I would say to people, and people get irritated by it, like, yeah, Kenyan Drake could do that if he had the opportunity. Now, the problem was he didn't have the professionalism in his first 2 years to have the coaching staff's trust. And that's the reason why you saw Damian Williams start over him earlier in the season. Hell, the opportunity that the week he had to produce and win the starting job, he showed up for practice. He showed up for a meeting late, allegedly. And that made coaches feel uncomfortable. So now, does he get it? To me, that's the biggest question. Does he get it? And this organization, particularly Adam Gase, he brought in Frank Gore, who he knows from his history with the 49ers, to teach this young back the way. Frank does everything the right way. Frank studies the right way. Frank interacts with the quarterback the right way. Frank interacts with the locker room the right way. Frank trains in the offseason the right way. So he brought in that guy to set the example, to set the bar. And hopefully that will show him what it takes. And if this works, if this mentorship works, you could be looking at one of the top 5 backs in the NFL.
As you guys are talking, we've talked so much about Jimmy Johnson on this podcast, and what strikes me is that what you guys were talking about with the defensive line is such a Jimmy Johnson philosophy that to have multiple pass rushers, like rotate in 6, 7, 8 guys, and when you talk about Gase's personality, it's very Jimmy Johnson. to me, this is where Gase and Jimmy Johnson are so different, because Jimmy just always wanted to find a back, right? Like a back to kind of lean on. And he even leaned on a guy like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who did not have great talent, right? But Jimmy was determined. I'm going to get this guy 1,000 yards. He's going to be our bell cow, even though we have Dan Marino, albeit Dan at the end. But we're going to lean on Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. My thing with Gase is, and I guess the Ajayi thing 2 years ago answers this a little bit, but if Kenyan Drake just takes off, and I think it's possible, what Chris is talking about the last 6 games of last year, I think it's very possible that he sustains that, particularly if his work ethic is where it should be. And we've seen, this is one of the things that gets me about fantasy football is every year in fantasy football, and I know this drives you crazy too, Omar, but every year in fantasy football, we see that everybody goes out and drafts the same damn running backs from the year before, right? And the top 10 list from the next season is always different than the season before because so much changes with that position. Guys get hurt, guys get old. But I do think that the 6-game sample size we saw from Kenyan Drake is sustainable for at least this season. And so if Frank Gore is showing him the way and just sort of acting as a supplemental piece here in the offense, can you see a scenario where Adam Gase will turn it over to Kenyan Drake the way that he kind of did reluctantly to Jay Ajayi 2 years ago and say, we're just going to ride you. We're going to see how far you can take us. You can play on all 3 downs. You can block, you can catch, you can run. How do you think he would handle that?
I don't think he would handle it very well. He's already said, I'm not a one-back kind of guy. I'm a back-by-committee kind of guy. Also, I don't think he looks at Kenyan Drake as just a runner. I think he looks at him as a pass catcher out the backfield. I know for a fact that a lot of those receptions that Jarvis Landry was getting last year, those will become Kenyan Drake receptions. Those will become Albert Wilson receptions. Those will become Danny Amendola receptions. You're going to split all those into 3, which means Kenyan Drake is probably going to catch about 30 passes. If you divide all those snaps up, you get 30, 30, 30. So you're going to see him catch a lot of passes in the backfield and then run after catch, which is where he made some of his best plays the last 2 seasons. So I do believe he will not go away from him, but I do believe that he will ride him a little bit more.
I think that kind of gets into Gase's ego or his arrogance, and does he want to win his way or does he want to win? Because if Kenyan Drake's legs do take over, we're not just talking about yards from scrimmage, meaning receptions and runs, but if he does it like Jay Ajayi did it, would Adam Gase want to win that way? And I think that's a big question. Adam Gase is arrogant. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it like Omar said. It's a good competitive thing. But if Kenyan Drake delivers the way he potentially could, do you become a running offense because that allows you to win? Or do you want to force this pass offense down to your team's throat? That's your system. So if it gets to that, I think it's going to be very telling about Adam Gase and how he handles such a situation.
Omar, do you feel like Frank Gore is enough cover as a backup running back?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Frank's hopefully, knock on wood, Hall of Fame running back. And hell, he was 20 yards shy of 1,000 yards last year, while being one of the few backs in the NFL, the top 5 back in the NFL in yards after contact. There's Frank Gore since his freshman year at University of Miami. There's certain things that just don't go away. They don't age, and that's vision. Don Solinger, who is probably my number 1 favorite coach ever to cover, I think he is the best. Not referring to head coaches, but position coaches. If you just look at the pedigree of the backs that he sent to the NFL before he was forced out at the University of Miami, it shows you that he is the greatest. And Frank is his favorite back. And Frank is his favorite back because of his lamps, because of his vision, and because of his ability to read blocks and set them up and get you those 4 yards. When you have a back that can consistently get you 4 yards for 13 seasons, that's something that's definitely dynamic, impressive, legendary, and I think that was probably one of my favorite moves that the Dolphins made this offseason. So absolutely, I do believe and have confidence, even if Kenyan Drake goes down, I think Frank Gore can run for 100 yards probably 6 times this season and get close to 1,000 yards.
I remember interviewing Frank Gore his sophomore season at UM, and I was for a story about sort of his difficulties with reading and learning and what he was fighting through at the time and everything he was going through with his mother. And I was incredibly impressed by him even then, like as a collegiate. And so it's only grown over time. And you talk about the professionalism that he showed in San Francisco, the way that not only players felt about him, but the way the media felt about him out there, and just sort of his general leadership, him the one to take the bullets all the time when things didn't go particularly well. I think it's a great addition. I agree with you, Omar. Like, of all the additions they made this offseason, that's, if not my favorite, it's certainly one of my favorites. Before we move on here, and I've got a challenge to you guys I want to offer before we go, but before we move on, we can't talk about all this without getting into the line play, because you've mentioned Pouncey here a couple times, Omar. Now, they've made 2 additions to the line in Kilgore and in Josh Sitton. And I'm just curious, because I know that that's something you study pretty carefully, and to get Perk's view on this too. Like, will Kenyan Drake be better just because the line is...
You'll have polar opposite of views.
I know. That's why I want to hit this. That's why I want to hit
this. This is the area we get into the absolute most fights about.
I shouldn't have saved this for minute 53 of the podcast, but we'll start with Omar on this, and I know you're going to give us an hour-long dissertation, but should Kenyan Drake be better this year just because the line may be better this year, or do you think it won't be better because they don't have Pouncey?
Both are the proper answer to that question, actually. Let's not pretend like they upgraded with Daniel Kilgore. The 49ers signed him to a mediocre, a little tiny deal before free agency started, went and upgraded their position and got, I forget which guy they got as their center, and basically was like, here, Dolphins, take him. We don't want him. Do you really think you're upgrading the position that way? When Mike Pouncey's sitting with a $6 million deal from the San Diego Chargers, despite the fact that you know he probably won't play all 16 games? So, no, you didn't upgrade there. But what it's saying is the lack of importance at that position, just because the league is going away from that position. Well, except for the 49ers. It's all about your philosophy and your approach and how best to spend your resources and your money. My approach is, don't collect more good players as opposed to getting rid of them. Unfortunately, the Dolphins have done the absolute opposite. But I think with Josh Sitton's addition, you will without a doubt see improvement. You'll see Laremy Tunsil. I'm a huge Jesse Davis fan. I think he's got 11 starts invested in him. I think you'll see him get to the next step and become probably one of the top performers next season or the year after that, and see him emerge as one of the top guards in the league. So I have confidence in that. So I really do believe that if these tackles show the talent that they have as first-round picks, you should be able to have a very forceful offensive line, especially with the depth that you have as a backup. So, yes, without a doubt, it should help these running backs and, not more importantly, help the quarterback, because the pocket will be more secure. And we know how Ryan Tannehill is. Despite what Pro Football Focus wants to tell you how great he is under pressure, your eyes don't deceive you. He's not that great under pressure.
Let me just say this. All this offensive line talk is a bunch of bullshit. Okay, the talk about they need to be better at guard and all this mess. What was the year they had 2 offensive linemen? 2014 go to the Pro Bowl, Brandon Albert and Mike Pouncey. 2013, 24, and what did it do for you? You've had an All-Pro center. You've had an two All-Pro guards, and Richie Incognito and Mike Pouncey. You've had an All-Pro left tackle in Brandon Albert, and it's gotten you 1 playoff appearance since 2008. I mean, stats have been down the last couple of years, haven't really done a whole lot for your bottom line, right? I'm spending my money on dudes who touch the football, the running back, the tight end, the quarterback, the receiver. I'm not just saying put 5 slappies out there for the offensive line, but pretty much, and especially at guard. I'm not spending any money at guard, really. I mean, what the hell difference is it going to make? Look at Dallas. Like, if you don't have your big playmakers out there, you can have as good an offensive line as you want. They aren't getting you anywhere. Spend your money on the guys who touch the football. So, offensive line, better or worse, just be decent, okay? And give me time to get the ball in the hands of my playmakers. I'm not spending a bunch of money on you guys. figure it out, but I'm not spending a bunch of money on O-line. It's overrated. It's a bunch of bull.
And this isn't even from someone who is of the Madden fantasy football generation. This is just this is Perk on his island as usual.
He's got a hatred for 300-pound men.
I'm not spending a lot of money on guards.
I remember when we were doing radio, and that was like the peak of the Dolphins' awfulness, or I guess the valley of the Dolphins' awfulness at guard. And we would talk about guards all the time, and we couldn't go to Perk because all he would say is, they're just freaking guards.
Yeah. Who was the guy from that Denver got that you wanted the Dolphins to get for like $4 million a year?
Evan Mathis.
Evan Mathis, right. I mean, come on, man. A freaking guard. And I know guards are getting paid right now. That's fine, but I think the Dolphins did a pretty decent job as far as doing the 2-for-1 for Pouncey. That get me more bodies, not more high-priced bodies. Get me more bodies. We'll figure it out. I like the approach. I do think Pouncey will be missed, but I don't think he'll be missed as much as Ndamukong Suh on the other side of the ball as far as linemen go. You can make up for that Pouncey loss, and I think they will. But get the ball in the hands of your playmakers. That's way more important than building this mammoth, expensive Pro Bowl offensive line.
Perk, didn't Gase go at you about this?
Yeah, I did. But, I think that Gase pretty much
agree.
They
fundamentally agree. Yes, I'm the one who always had the counters with Gase. Like he called. I shouldn't say this, but
say it. It's a podcast, Omar. Nobody's going to hear
it. When they signed Josh Sitton, I got a call. Now will you leave me the alone about guards? And I was like, all right, fine.
Well, that'll increase the download, so now people will hear it. So we'll use that with the messaging here. But I knew that would get you guys going. All right, before we let you go here, as you know, we're going to be having some guys on from the other papers, the enemy. Although I guess these days newspapers are all in the same.
We all in this together, baby.
Yeah,
we all in this together.
You're in this together, so it's not quite as fierce as it used to be. So we're going to have Barry and Beasley on together, and we're going to have Joe and Jason on, so Jason could talk about kickers for an hour. But without denigrating anybody else, just give us your pitch here. You guys got 30 seconds each. Why should people check out the Sun Sentinel's Dolphins coverage this season?
Oh, do I go?
Go ahead,
we're going to have the most flavor. We're going to have the liveliest coverage, the best video. Y'all know how me and Omar like to go at it on video. We're going to have the best videos. We're going to have the best stories. Whether it's Omar talking about offensive line or me writing about quarterbacks, because y'all know Omar hates writing about quarterbacks, and Ryan
Omar
don't
write about quarterbacks. Yeah.
No, he does not. Another reason we work well together. But yeah, you're going to have the best coverage, wall to wall, up and down, big and small, ridiculous and serious from the Sun Sentinel that you will find in South Florida.
All I will say is when training camp comes, you know what we do. We make it seem like you're there every day. That's what you get from the Sun Sentinel.
Brilliant. Chris Perkins, check him out on Twitter, at Chris Perk. Omar Kelly, who very reluctantly got on Twitter, but now is not very reluctant to tweet, at Omar Kelly on Twitter. They both cover the Miami Dolphins for the Sun Sentinel. Check it out at sunsentinel.com. Thanks for the time, guys. This is great.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Anytime, guys.
Hey, this is Gary and Thorne, host of the Fantasy on 5 podcast, part of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, letting you know that your fantasy football needs are covered this season. My co-host David Ganos and I will be leading you hand in hand through your draft and right up to Championship Sunday, offering our insight into the world of fantasy football. We'll also be inviting some of our friends from Sports Illustrated, Yahoo, and DraftKings. Look for us Tuesdays and Thursdays starting in July, wherever you currently listen to your favorite 5 Reasons Network podcasts.